similarities between our lands.
Hello, I'm Esther Odanga. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus.
Good afternoon, Esther. I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, houses are heavily damaged after a deadly earthquake struck the Indonesian tourist island of Bali, leaving at least 3 people dead. The 4.8 magnitude quake struck at a relatively shallow depth of 10 kilometers or 6 miles northeast of the town of Banjar, Wanasari.
Myanmar's junta chief will be excluded from an upcoming ASEAN summit. The group said Saturday a rare rebuke as concerns rise over the military government's commitment to defusing a bloody crisis.
ASEAN and its partners reaffirmed their commitment to raise the ASEAN people's public awareness on the importance of disaster risk reduction during the commemoration of ASEAN Day for Disaster Management, or ADDM 2021.
A Vietnamese artist has been recreating landscapes using vibrant shades of fabric cut from scarves, traditional áo dai, or whatever material she could find during years of poverty in the 1980s.
First in our news, houses are heavily damaged after a deadly earthquake struck the Indonesian tourist island of Bali, leaving at least 3 people dead. The 4.8 magnitude quake struck at a relatively shallow depth of 10 kilometers or 6 miles northeast of the town of Banjar, Wanasari. Take a look.
Terjebak dia memang setiang dang pesu dia. Dia kuranan tiang, dia cucun tiang itu lama tang cucun tiang, dia kuranan tiang. Semuanya rusak, rumah semuanya rusak. Tidak bisa ditempati.
Kalau Bapak sendiri ada luka atau gimana?
Ada. Istri saya kepalanya, kaki saya kepala.
3 people were killed Saturday when an earthquake struck the Indonesian tourist island Bali. 2 people died when the quake triggered a landslide that buried their house in Bangli residence, while another person was killed in the port town of Karangasem, officials said. The death toll was not expected to rise, they added. Disaster agency spokesman Abdul Mohari said the quake was felt strongly for 5 seconds. The tremor's epicenter was far from the main tourist hub in Bali, which is slowly reopening to international visitors after a pandemic shutdown. Indonesia experiences frequent quakes due to its position on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an arc of intense seismic activity where tectonic plates collide that stretches from Japan through the Southeast Asia and across the Pacific Basin. In January, more than 100 people were killed and thousands left homeless by a 6.2 magnitude quake that struck Sulawesi Island, reducing buildings to a tangled mass of twisted metal and chunks of concrete in the seaside city of Mamuju. A 7.5 magnitude quake and subsequent tsunami in Palu 3 years ago left more than 4,300 people dead or missing.
Myanmar's junta chief will be excluded from an upcoming ASEAN summit. The group said Saturday a rare rebuke as concerns rise over the military government's commitment to defusing a bloody crisis. Foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed at an emergency meeting late Friday that a non-political representative from Myanmar would be invited to the October 26 to 28 summit. Current ASEAN chair Brunei said in a statement. The decision effectively excluded junta leader Min Aung Hlaing. The Myanmar junta slammed the decision on Saturday evening, accusing ASEAN of breaching its policy of non-interference in the domestic affairs of member states. The Myanmar Foreign Ministry issued a statement saying, quote, Myanmar is extremely disappointed and strongly objected to the outcomes of the emergency foreign ministers meeting, as the discussions and decisions on Myanmar's representation issue was done without consensus and was against the objectives of ASEAN, end of quote. Earlier, junta spokesman Brigadier General Zhao Mintun told the BBC Burmese section that interference from non-ASEAN countries had also been a factor. He seized on talks between the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and ASEAN Special Envoy Brunei's second Foreign Minister Erywan Yusof ahead of the meeting and also singled out EU pressure. The bloc took a strong stand after the junta rebuffed requests that a special envoy meet with all stakeholders in Myanmar, a phrase seen to include ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The statement noted insufficient progress in the implementation of a 5-point plan agreed by ASEAN leaders in April to end turmoil following a coup in February.
Now, staying in Myanmar, the chief lawyer for ousted Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi said Friday he had been banned by the junta from speaking to journalists, diplomats, or international organizations. The gag order came after he relayed vivid testimony from the country's deposed president, Win Myint, describing how he rejected a military offer to resign to save himself during the February 1 coup. Suu Kyi is on trial on a raft of charges ranging from sedition to breaching coronavirus restrictions and faces a long jail term if convicted. Lawyer Khin Maung Thao posted on his Facebook page that, quote, well, they shut my mouth with 144. The number refers to Section 144 of Myanmar Criminal Procedure Code, which was used to issue the gag. This communication disturbs or harms some people who are acting in line with the law, and it may cause public unrest, the order said. Now, the order said, and again, I quote, starting from October 14, lawyer Khin Maung Thao is prohibited from communicating, meeting, and speaking to foreign and local media, foreign diplomats, international organizations, representatives from foreign government, or any other organizations outside directly or indirectly. The 76-year-old Suu Kyi is scheduled to testify in court for the first time later this month. Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has justified his power grab by citing alleged electoral fraud in the last year's election, which Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy won convincingly.
Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, has hailed a resolution passed by the provincial government of Palawan, protesting the recent fishing ban unilaterally imposed by the Chinese government in the South China Sea. The resolution adopted on June 9 this year echoed that the ban covering areas within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, was a breach of Article 58 of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 arbitral ruling. It stated that China's extension of the ban beyond its legitimate maritime entitlement was an act without basis under international law. Beijing imposed the moratorium from May 1 to August 16 this year, covering waters north of 12 degrees north latitude, which encroaches areas on Philippine territory and EEZ or a Philippine exclusive economic zone, including the Bajo de Masinloc. The ban is an annual affair imposed by the Chinese government in the South China Sea since 1999. China, the Philippines, and several other littoral states have overlapping claims in the South China Sea. In a 2016 arbitral ruling, the huge-based Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled that Beijing's 9-dash line, a demarcation that covers almost 80% of the South China Sea, is illegal.
Some two Philippine Army, or also known as PA helicopter pilots, took part in a military proficiency free-fall exercise with the Special Forces Regiment in Fort Magsaysay, Nueva Ecija. Military freefall is a distinct form of tactical parachuting technique employed by elite army forces, the PA said in a Facebook post on Sunday night. It added the exercise held on October 12 is part of the Special Forces Regiment's 4th Quarter Military Sustainment Training. Also, the PA said its Aviation Hiraya Regiment P, the unit of all its pilots, is still conducting proficiency training for rotary pilots. Student pilots from Rotary Wing Transition Course conducted cross-country training flights from the Fort Magsaysay Army Aerodrome in Palayan City, Nueva Ecija to Camp O'Donnell in Capasterlac. They said, and I quote, the training will enhance the flight and navigational skills of Army aviators in preparation for future missions. Currently, the PA operates 3 rotary assets for training and emergency purposes.
On our weather report, the onset of northeast monsoon or amihan amid the reemergence of the La Niña phenomenon is brightening the water supply potential of Angat Dam in Luzon. On October 15, Pag-asa announced the termination of this year's habagat season in the Philippines. Let's take a look.
Recent oceanic and atmospheric conditions indicate La Niña has developed in tropical Pacific. Since July of 2021, the sea surface temperature in the central and equatorial Pacific started to cool, and further temperature drop strengthened in September, reaching La Niña threshold. Based on the latest forecast, La Niña is likely to persist until the first quarter of 2022.
Water in Angat is still below its normal high level, but amihan can change that, especially with La Niña's help, according to Pag-asa hydrologist Edgar de la Cruz on Saturday. He said rain from amihan will raise Angat's water and bring this closer to its normal high level. He said the watershed of Angat is located closer to the eastern section of Luzon, so this dam generally receives more water from the rain of amihan than habagat, which mainly affects the western section. The water rise will improve Angat's capability to serve its customers in the coming months.
In other news, President Rodrigo Duterte on Saturday called on the local candidates of his ruling party, the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan, or PDP Laban, in the 2022 polls to safeguard the integrity of elections. Duterte made the call as he reminded the PDP Laban's local bets to adhere to the party's principles and values before, during, and after the May 9, 2022 elections. During the proclamation of PDP Laban's local candidates in Iligan City, Lanao del Sur, Duterte assured them that they would get the party's full support as they seek local government posts. Let's take a look.
I am confident that our candidates have the competence, integrity, and dedication that our people are looking for in a public servant. Keep in mind that our victory will not only be ours, but more importantly, to the nation. As a political party, we should continue to put the welfare and progress of our country and people on top of our priorities. Our mission is, and will always be, to improve the quality of the life of the Filipinos.
Duterte likewise said he is optimistic that the PDP-Laban's local candidates would stay as good leaders. He encouraged them to do their best to make the country a more prosperous Philippines.
More
Crystal
news
and I will be back after the short break.
Araw-araw sa panahon ngayon, may daming tanong kailangan ng tugon. Nandito si Ali at si Papi na rin, ang smart at pretty nanay, ang sigla pag nagkwentuhan. Ang sigaw ng Pinoy Nation, information, education. Ating saloobin, ipakita natin ang nagsagot sa problema natin. Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo?
Posibleng palawigin ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte ang Visiting Forces Agreement. Tumaas pa ang reproduction number ng COVID-19.
Isinagawa ang turnover ng Lingap Goodie Bag sa San Miguel, Bulacan.
Ang maghahayag ng official statement ay ang pamilya.
Hindi lang sa aspetong pang-espiritual hinahangaan ng Iglesia ni Cristo.
Mapaunlad ang kabuhayan ng mga differently abled person.
Bukod sa pagtaguyod ng wika at kulturang Pinoy,
Inaasahang bababa pa ang bilang ng mga Pinoy na walang trabaho.
Sumusunod sa mga alituntuning ipinatutupad ng gobyerno bilang pag-iingat sa COVID-19.
Isa sa naging dahilan ng pagtaas ng tubig dito noong mga nakaraang araw.
Handa ng Senado at Kamara na magpasa ng mga panukalang batas.
Umunlad ang peace and order sa bansa sa panahon ng panunungkulan ni Pangulong Duterte.
May ilang nagkaroon ng Delta variant ng COVID-19 ang nabakunahan na. Magandang gabi, Pilipinas.
Ang trabaho naman talaga ng maritime group ng PNP is to enforce the maritime laws.
Tayo lang yung stricto, pero in other parts of the country, pwede na naman ang tourism.
Definitely, we are ready to respond to a possible spike.
Sapagkat ang aming intensyon ay makatulong lang sa mga tao na wala talagang magamit na gamot.
92 voted for this resolution, which will make it stronger, calling on the Justice Department to come up with more stringent ways to be able to avert these hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Mas marami po tayong magagamit ngayon na mga tools or mga equipment.
Maraming salamat, Weng, at sa buong puwersa ng Balitalakayan sa pagkakataong ito.
Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Weng de la Fuente sa...
At itong Balitalakayan, we live in interesting times.
And you're still watching ASEAN in Focus. 5.33 million rai of agricultural areas affected by floods since September 1. For more details, here's Faye Bartek. Hi, Faye.
Good afternoon to you, Crystal, and to all our viewers. There is a report from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives that the flood in certain areas of Thailand has put a great extent of damage. The damage is in plantation and fishery and even livestock. In plantation, there is a 5.33 million rai in different provinces. To be exact, these are 48 provinces. 3.61 million rai is rice paddy, 1.67 million rai is crops fields, and 39,500 rai is fruit plantations and others. And according to the government, each household who are affected will receive 6,700 Thai baht as a financial aid. And the farmers who are affected are 463,615. And crystal and fishery businesses, there are 88 or 38 provinces are affected, which have the 57,000 rai affected because of the flood. And each household will receive 22,272 Thai baht for their financial aid. In livestock businesses, Crystal, there are 15 provinces that affects 6,938 rai. And in this, 6.34 million are poultry, about 195,000 are pigs, 150,000 cattle, and 51,300 goats and sheep. And still waiting for the exact amount of compensation for this affected household. And according to the Royal Irrigation Department, Crystal, the flood situation here in Thailand there are 20 provinces has yet to subside. These provinces are Nakhon Ratchasima, Chayapum, Khon Kaen, Kalasin, Mahasarakam, Ubon Ratchathani, Lopburi, Saraburi, Ayutthaya, Singburi, Angtong, Pitsanulok, Pichit, Chainat, Supanburi, Uthai Thani, Royet, Trat, and Chantaburi, and even Prachinburi. Back to you, Crystal.
Thank you for your update, Faye. Looking forward for more report about the agricultural sector there in Thailand.
We will. Thank you, Crystal. And this is Faye Barte reporting live here in Thailand, and we live in interesting times.
Now, going back to the Philippines, unvaccinated workers are now not only at risk of losing their employment, some are now also being threatened with delayed wages by their employers. This is according to the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, or TUCP. The country's largest labor group immediately called on the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, to impose harsh penalties on companies engaging in the so-called no vaccine, no pay scheme. In a statement on Sunday, TUCP President Raymond Mendoza urged DOLE to come out with a new advisory outlining the fines and imprisonment imposed on employers for withholding the salaries for unvaccinated employees. Citing a report from Business Mirror, he further said the advisory should include double indemnification for erring companies to deter others from implementing such illegal work arrangements. Citing the provision of the Republic Act number 8188, or the double indemnity law, Mendoza said the concerned companies should be made to pay double the unpaid benefits they owed to their employees. TUCP issued a statement after some workers had the release of their salaries withheld by their supervisors until they could present vaccination cards indicating they are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. TUCP spokesperson Alan Tanhusay lamented that the number of workers who reported salaries being delayed with outnumbered by those who lost their jobs because of the vaccine status.
Meanwhile, in Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City, administered first dose of COVID-19 vaccine to 98.7% of residents aged 18 and older, the city Center for Disease Control reported Sunday morning. Since the southern metropolis kicked off vaccination campaign on June 19, the cumulative vaccine doses inoculated reached 12,571,081 doses, with 5,457,798 fully vaccinated people, representing over 75% of the eligible population. Ho Chi Minh City has been allocated with 14,091,264 doses of COVID-19 vaccines, accounting for 20.39% of total vaccines delivered to Vietnam so far. The city planned to give vaccine to adolescents aged between 12 and 17 from October 22. Taal volcano emitted a 1,800-meter or 1.8 kilometers tall plume due to degassing activity at its active vent and crater in the past 24 hours, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology or PHIVOC said. Taal volcano is still under alert level 2, meaning there is still increased arrest and entry into the volcano's permanent danger zone is still prohibited. The volcano emitted at least 11,432 tons of sulfur dioxide in the past 24 hours because of upwelling of hot volcanic fluids in its lake, PHIVOC said in its update today. Join Eagle News on Telegram. PHIVOC also monitored 28 volcanic earthquakes. PHIVOC listed the following possible hazards that can occur: steam-driven or phreatic or gas-driven explosions, volcanic earthquakes, minor ashfall, lethal accumulations or expulsions of volcanic gas. Steam-driven or phreatic or gas-driven explosions, volcanic earthquakes, minor ashfall, lethal accumulation or expulsions of volcanic gas. Because of this, aircrafts are also prohibited from flying close to the volcano.
Domestic growth is seen to be continuously supported by inflows from overseas Filipino workers or OFWs, which remains resilient amidst the repatriation of around 700,000 workers since the pandemic hit in 2020. On Friday, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP reported the 5.1% year-on-year jump in cash remittances last August to $2.609 billion and the 5.7% increase in the first 8 months this year to $20.38 billion. However, the cash remittance inflows last August are lower than the previous month's $2.853 billion, which Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, or RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort, in a report said is fine, since the latest figures remain one of the highest since the height of the pandemic last year, when strict quarantine measures were implemented. On other news, the Philippines received 720,000 doses of the government-procured Sputnik V vaccine on Saturday, the biggest delivery so far by Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute. Emirates flight EK332 landed around 4 p.m. at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport Terminal 3 in Pasay City with 360,000 doses each of components 1 and 2. The shipment was welcomed by National Task Force or NTF against COVID-19 Special Medical Advisor Dr. Ted Herbosa, Russian Ambassador Marat Pavlov, Philippine Archipelago International Trading Corporation Chair Benito Yap Ao, and President Olivia Limpe Ao, NTF Director Francel Tuborlupa, Department of Health Director Maria Soledad Antonio, and NTF Medical Consultant Dr. Maria Paz Corrales. Barbosa said the new shipment brought the country's Sputnik V jabs to 1.3 million doses and the country's total doses received to 91,339,530 doses. He said the government is committed to fulfilling its promise of acquiring around 104 million doses by the end of October.
On the other news, Typhoon Maring left roughly 2 billion pesos worth of agricultural loss according to the Department of Agriculture Saturday, October 16. However, the Department of Agriculture is doing all it can to help affected agricultural workers. Department of Agriculture Assistant Secretary Christine Evangelista said during a Laging Handa public briefing that the Department of Agriculture also has Agricultural Credit Policy Council or ACPC and Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation or PCIC for those who need capital. The ACPC was created to help synchronize all credit policies and programs and to review and evaluate the economic soundness of ongoing and proposed agricultural credit programs. ACPC was also tasked to undertake measures to increase its fund base and adopt other liquidity interest stabilization and risk cover mechanisms for its various financing programs. Meanwhile, PCIC is the implementing agency of the government's agricultural insurance program. Its main mandate is to provide insurance protection to farmers against losses arising from natural calamities, plant diseases, and pest infestations of the rice and corn crops as well as other crops.
ASEAN and its partners reaffirmed their commitment to raise the ASEAN people's public awareness on the importance of disaster risk reduction during the commemoration of ASEAN Day for Disaster Management, or ADDM 2021. The ADDM is convened annually and jointly with the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, or IDDRR, every 13th of October. Take a look.
In December 2004, the ASEAN ministers responsible for disaster management decided to commemorate the ADDM to secure and sustain participation of all stakeholders in disaster risk reduction activities. Held in conjunction with the International Day for Disaster Reduction, it demonstrates ASEAN's commitment and efforts towards disaster reduction and management. This leads to an important end goal, that is to alleviate the hardship and suffering of peoples of ASEAN who live in one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world. While we continue to work towards a new normal, adapting to COVID-19, we must look beyond pandemic, focus on building enduring partnerships and finding innovative solutions for disaster management and that are in tandem with the dynamic pace of globalization.
China is ready to work with ASEAN and tap the full potential of the China-ASEAN Disaster Management Cooperation Mechanism, under the framework of which there is a lot China and ASEAN could and should do together. For instance, we could strengthen policy coordination, work on the emergency response to severe natural disasters, coordinate emergency humanitarian assistance, promote personnel exchanges, including mutual visits and training, as well as better apply digital technologies in disaster management. China is also willing to sponsor more capacity building projects through the ACCF and offer training courses under the ASEAN-China Young Leaders Scholarship.
It is my great pleasure to have the first ASEAN-Japan ministerial meeting on disaster management today. As ASEAN and Japan are prone to natural disasters, disaster management is a common issue between us. We believe that it is important to continue to promote cooperation as a partner for a better life. Japan believes that this is a meaningful project which contributes to One ASEAN, One Response, as well as ASEAN centrality, as reflected in the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP. Of all relevant ASEAN sectoral bodies and entities associated with ASEAN, it will be presented at this commemorative first AMMDM plus Japan. The report will be developed into action plans at the Joint Task Force to promote synergy with other relevant ASEAN bodies on HADR this month. Japan has also supported the development of a web-based monitoring evaluation M&E system for the AADMER Work Program 2021-2025 through JIFE to ensure steady implementation thereof. The web-based M&E system provides a systematic process for the collection, analysis, and reporting of monitoring data to track progress in the mobilization of resources and the completion of activities in order to provide evidence of priority outputs on the expected outcomes and impact of the AADMER Work Program 2021-2025. I am pleased that this M&E system will be launched at this first AMMDM plus Japan. I hope that the AAMDER Work Program 2021-2025 will be further steadily implemented under the results-based monitoring by the web-based M&E. We recognize the great importance of deepening the strategic relationship between Japan and ASEAN through these efforts related to disaster management. We will make use of our knowledge and experience to contribute to the creation of a further disaster-resistant region. In just 2 years' time, Japan and ASEAN will celebrate the 50th anniversary of their friendship and cooperation. I hope that our relations will be even closer in the future. Japan would like to further promote cooperation with ASEAN in a wide range of fields, including disaster management.
The launch of the joint plan on the ASEAN Day for Disaster Management is timely, as the theme of this year's commemoration is strengthening partnerships and innovation for disaster management in the ASEAN. The recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change clearly describes the transboundary nature of the impact of climate crisis and the challenges that the world will face in the next decades. As we have seen during the pandemic, partnerships across organizations, communities, countries, regions, and indeed the world have been critical in helping affected people. A strong response depends on acting together to ease suffering, whether it is because of climate-related disasters, food insecurity, discrimination, or whenever people are forced to move.
As we embark on the implementation of the ADMER Work Program 2021-2025, we are capitalizing on new technologies to chart our progress through the web-based monitoring and evaluation system, which will ensure that ASEAN is on the track towards meeting the goals of the 5 years plan.
This year's commemoration took place on 14th of October via video conference hosted by Singapore as the current chair of the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Disaster Management, or AMMDM. In his closing remarks, Secretary General for ASEAN Dato Lim Jock Hoi highlighted the importance of innovation and partnership in disaster management in years ahead, as well as ASEAN's commitments towards realizing a disaster-resilient ASEAN. The commemoration witnessed the progress made through partnership and innovation, including the embarkation of the ADMER Work Program 2021 to 2025 implementation and the capitalization of new technologies to chart the progress through the web-based monitoring and evaluation system, which ensures the ASEAN is on track towards meeting the goal of its 5-year plan.
In a hot and stuffy room at her house in Hanoi, Tran Tantuk holds up a delicate silk scarf and begins snipping it into tiny pieces. Ready to paste onto her works of art for 4 decades, Tuk has been recreating Vietnamese landscapes using vibrant shades of fabric cut from scarves, traditional áo dai, or whatever material she could find during years of poverty in the 1980s. Let's take a look.
Với cái chất liệu vải này thì tôi hoàn toàn không bao giờ được bật quạt cả. Bởi vì những cái chi tiết mà trước khi tôi dán vào tranh tôi phải ướm và nó rất là nhỏ. Và khi mà bật quạt lên thì nó sẽ bị bay mất. Và trong tất cả những cái họa phẩm của tôi, cái đống vải nó rất là to và nó không thể tránh được những cái bụi bặm. Cho nên là tôi cũng không dám bật điều hòa. Rất là thời tiện.
Không hết từ ngày đến Tết mùng 3 rồi.
Tất cả những cái họa tiết mà tôi dùng ở trong một cái bức, trong tác phẩm của tôi, nó hoàn toàn là được cắt từ những cái mảnh vải may áo dài, rồi những cái khăn quàng lụa. Nó là những cái chi tiết rất nhỏ, rất tinh và rất đẹp. Mà những cái chi tiết này là tôi đã phải tìm mua ở những cái mảnh vải may áo dài của các mẹ, các chị. Thậm chí là tôi phải cắt từ những cái khăn lụa rất là đẹp mà có khi bạn tôi còn gửi từ nước ngoài về.
And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. Once again, this is Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And I am Esther Odanga from your Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng patnubay at gabay ng magulang para sa mga batang